Now, in the previous video, I told you why a PDP is so helpful and beneficial for you. I've given you in videos before that all the information about the enhanced CPD. And one of the things I said is that before you make a plan of what CPD you want to do, there are two things you really need to know well. The first thing is your circumstances. You know, the environment you work in, the kind of patient population you see, what sort of, circumstances are you in time-wise, financially, etc. And the second thing is identifying those gaps in your knowledge, the learning needs. It's only when you know these two things can you make a really robust, focused plan. So what I'm going to do in this video is tell you all about the self-assessment. And what I want to do for you is log on to your www.DentinalTubules.com account and go in there, and by the end of this video, you'll be able to do a good self-assessment. So stage 2 it is, and self-assessment comes into the center of our circle. The aim of this one is to understand self-assessment, why it's important, how you think about each section in your self-assessment, and an insight into each attribute of it. And I'll give you some information that. And by the end of this video, by the end of this stage, you will have completed the self-assessment section on your intelligent PDP. Now, if you look at the General Dental Council's template, which you can download as a paper form in their enhanced CPD website, you will see some form of self-assessment is there already. You can see they want to know about your patient population and your workplace. So therefore, self-assessment now becomes important in our circle. And there are 4 things you look at with your self-assessment. You look at your environment as the first thing. You look at the resources available to you. You look at the constraints and your strengths and development areas. I don't like calling them weaknesses. I prefer to call them development areas. Now, log on to your www.DentinalTubules.com account. And on the left, click on the Intelligent PDP. And then go ahead and click on that box which says Self-Assessment. Click on Add a new self-assessment. Now that's what I've done, and I was doing this on my own. So I said self-assessment done alone on the 18th of July 2018. However, if you're doing it with an appraiser, you could say self-assessment done with appraiser, or with an employer. Then you say self-assessment done with employer. And you go ahead and cover these 4 sections. Now I'm going to tell you more about these 4 sections as we go along. Let's talk about each of these attributes. How about we start with the environment? Now if you look at the Intelligent PDP self-assessment box where it says environment, there are 2 things you look at. You look at your workplace and you look at your patients. And you can actually develop this self-assessment with your team as well. What do you think about patients? And here's an example of what I've filled in there. As my workplace, where I'm in a specialist referral practice, and the kind of patients I see who are from local referral general practitioners. But actually you could do some more. So let me think about this. Think about your patient demographics. Now all of you say we haven't had time for this, but sit as a team. What are the kind of patients you see? There's so many things you could look at. You can look at the age demographics of your patients. You could actually look at, are you getting more female or male patients? Is it because of the type of practice you work in? Are there private patients? Are there NHS patients? Are there patients who are mixed, you do a lot of mixed treatments? Are there a lot of geriatric patients who need a certain level of care? For example, one of my colleagues moved to a new practice and I said, what kind of patients do you see? I was making him do the self-assessment. He said, I'm not sure. Went back and he had a look. And he said, Drew, I just realized a lot of my patients are between the 50 and 65 age because of the area we're in. And a lot of the treatments are involved around people who are partially dentate with tooth surface loss and seem to have medical problems. It was because of that age demographic he realized that just from doing a self-assessment, he would be better off learning about tooth surface loss, patients with partially dentate problems, so restoring missing spaces, for example, and the fact that he said, I need to really polish up on my medical emergencies, my medical knowledge, my medical drugs, etc. relevance in practice because that's the demographic of patients. I see periodontal patients in practice, and a lot of them, because of the years of chronic periodontitis, before it presents to patients thinking, oh, I've got a problem, a lot of them are between the 50 and 60 age group. It's a similar sort of situation we work with. Suddenly you realize just doing your self-assessment is bringing out elements within your practice you didn't think about. A lot of you may, in your workplace, say, I'm in an NHS practice and we don't get enough time for patients. You may then feel, but I want to communicate with these patients. Why not find a course that's efficient in that communication? Or you say, I want to move into a private practice, and suddenly things change. That's the way you check your environment out. That's the way you deliver that. Understanding your environment helps you understand the kind of learning courses that will match that. Environment dictates performance. It's something my friend Daniel Priestley says fairly often. It's the understanding the environment you're in which will dictate the kind of performance you do. So think about that. And then think about your resources. And on the Tubules Intelligent PDP, it's amazing because your favorites and your study clubs automatically are entered into your resources section. But you could write down any journals or any associations you're members of, any mentors you have, because it's showing that these are the resources you have available for learning. You can't make a plan unless you know what you're planning for, and part of that is knowing the elements available to you. So if you say that I need to do a whole course on composites, but I need to learn the knowledge of materials, I need to learn the way to do the composite build-ups in worn teeth. I'm taking the example of my friend who was seeing a lot of patients who had worn teeth. You think, hold on, I think for the material knowledge, I may actually think about just learning this theoretically, either by reading journals or watching online videos on Drew's website called DentinalTubules or something else like that. Suddenly you realize, oh, what's my resources available? Oh, I've got these journals. It's a brilliant way to make you think about your learning plan. So the resources are important. If you have any mentors, ask them, can I use you to help me here? Now the mentors are a resource in the way that you can bounce ideas off them. Mentors can be used in all sorts of ways, but maybe they'll help you develop your plan. So putting that in the resources is great. So with Tubules, you'll see, this is mine. All the favorites videos and study clubs are there. Long list of study clubs, because I've been added to every one of them around the world. But I can add all these other things, the journals, the mentors, the associations, all that information. That's how you do it. And then you go and enter your constraints. And when you think about constraints, there are two things. Time, and I've written constraints there, it should be finance. Time and finance. Now, if you think about it, if we had all the time in the world and all the money in the world, wouldn't it be awesome for us to be able to go and do any course anywhere? Doesn't matter. But you have to be focused because time is of premium and finance is of premium. So the first thing the Intelligent PDP does, it helps you prioritize your learning need so you know which courses to do when, to know which courses to give priority to. But if you now say time is a constraint and I need to do these courses, I need to do a composite and a denture course, which is a lot of time out of practice, maybe I'll do less of my core CPD online. Core CPD is gone, recommended CPD online. But if you've done something online and somebody goes, why did you do that and not go on a proper course? You could use your self-assessment as a way to justify that. But the self-assessment is important. How many of you actually budget for your learning education every year? You could easily put under constraints of finance, my budget is X thousand a year. And my time I'm going to spend is 6 days out of practice and maybe another 2 or 3 days if a course comes along last minute, which fits my plan. Doing an assessment of your time and your finance makes you start thinking of all this information so that you find specific courses. You become more efficient at what you do. Now I'll show you when we're doing the learning plans about how just doing the recommended regulatory CPD takes up about 75 hours in a 5-year cycle. It only leaves you with about 25 hours if you want to meet the GDC's minimum quota. But it means you've got limited time. So you can do your regulatory CPD online and say my time is limited, but I will then be able to go on the courses I want. So these are some of the tips I can tell you about the constraints area, but you fill it in. You tell us what your time and constraints are. I work 2 days a week in practice. I don't take a huge salary out of tubules. So therefore, I know one of my constraints always is finance. I cannot do every course under the sun. I have to be very selective about which course I do and what I gain from it. So I'm very focused in making sure every course I attend is really correct for my learning needs. It's only because I do a self-assessment of my patient population, my environment, my resources and my constraints that I can get this sort of information and insight. That's what a PDP is supposed to do. And the final thing, here's my constraints. And as I told you, look, it says there financial. I only work 2 days a week. And therefore I'm limited by what I can afford in terms of courses. And finally, the skills and knowledge section on the Tubules PDP. And it looks at your strengths and your development areas. So you can fill this in. Now, most of the times what happens is if we start writing down our own strengths and development areas, we will always be biased. We may be biased in terms of thinking we're better at something than we actually think we are. Or we may be biased, we may say, actually, I'm not that good at this thing, but actually you're fairly competent in it. Now, there's something called competency and confidence. And if you haven't been doing a procedure for a long time, your competency may go down, but your confidence, thinking, yeah, I can still do it, is high up here. So these sort of things are very difficult. And doing your own assessment of strengths and development areas is not completely objective. There's bias. And that's something to remember. And if you really want an objective assessment, you do your 360 feedback and appraisal. And I'll explain that in more detail in due course. But at the moment, it's not important. However, on your self-assessment section, you do have to fill in your skills and strengths and development areas, like I've done across there, where I said it, that my strengths are communication. I know my strengths are communication because I told you about that course earlier in the video before, that my strength is I know about the ECPD guidelines and I know about PDP more. But a lot of my development areas are all coming from the soft tissue skills, etc. Here's something I developed which I think you may find useful for your strengths and development areas. Let's do it for the whole dental team. If you're someone who's a receptionist or a welcome team member, just close your eyes and imagine a new patient just walks through the door. What do you think? Within 10 seconds, think. What are the 3 main things you wish this patient would say or request that you feel comfortable dealing with? What are the 3 main things you hope this patient doesn't say that you feel uncomfortable dealing with? Example, I hope the patient doesn't say that he's not going to pay today, because then I have to have this discussion with him. Does that identify a developmental area for you? Does it identify your strengths? Try this again with dental nurses. Are you a dental nurse watching this video? Close your eyes again for 10 seconds and think. This patient walks into the surgery. What are the 3 things or 3 procedures you wish this patient's going to have which you love assisting with? Or if you're going to do any kind of treatment within your remit of GDC's remit competencies, what are the 3 things they may have? And what are the 3 things you wish this patient doesn't have? Because you'll be like, oh, this is going to be boring, or I'm not good at this. Same thing now. Let's do it for dentists, hygienists, therapists. Close your eyes. Patient walks in through the door. 10 seconds, think. What are the 3 procedures or problems this patient has which I'll really enjoy treating? And you think, but three things which I hope this patient doesn't have. For example, you may not enjoy endo and you think, I hope this patient doesn't have endo. Then endodontics diagnosis or management becomes a development area for you possibly. This is the kind of things to think about. Same with any dental technicians. Close your eyes and imagine that a dentist is sending you some work. What are the things you wish that the work is sent to you? 3 things. And 3 things you wish that it was not there when you open that postage bag. That's another way of trying to determine your own self, your strengths and development areas. And if you've done this exercise, insert it into the intelligent PDP. So in your intelligent PDP now, you've done a self-assessment, you've done your environment, your workplace and your patients, you've done your full resources, you've done your constraints, financial, time, any others. And now you've done your full skills and knowledge assessment as well. Save it. That is your self-assessment complete. Congratulations. You've now completed the self-assessment section of your intelligent PDP. Stage 2 has been completed.